statement. This document contains forward-looking statements about our product direction. The development, release, and timing of any features or functionality described for our products remains at the sole discretion of Storj Labs. The information herein is not a commitment to deliver any material, code, or functionality, and should not be relied upon in making purchase decisions. Our topics today are branding, go-to-market, and SLA enforcement, alpha update with development milestones and a demo, governance, a greeting from board member Catherine Johnson, V3 network waitlist update, and then we'll have our Q&A section. Our speakers today are Sean Wilkinson, founder and chief strategy officer of Storj, Ben Golub, interim CEO and executive chairman, Catherine Johnson, Storj board member, JT Olio, vice president of engineering, John Sanderson, vice president of marketing, John Gleason, vice president of operations, and I'm the host, Jocelyn Matthews, the community manager for Storj. We're now going to go to Ben Golub for an executive summary. Ben?
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you all for joining. In particular, I'd like to thank the many members of our community, the storage node operators, the open source contributors, the customers, the people who are testing out our network. Storj is truly a community effort, and we appreciate your support. Executive summary, it's been a really busy quarter on top of a really busy year. Our major focus has been the movement from V2 to V3, and V3, as you know, is designed to be Amazon S3 compatible, highly durable, performant, and resistant to fraud, and deliver much better economics for our users, for our storage node operators, for partners, and for Storj. We're very excited about our cadence. We'll be talking about that. We're very excited about our latest release, as well as the release we did in January. We've had significant BD and sales activity, which we'll be going into greater detail on. We've been operationally paying on time for the past 5 months, which we know is important to a lot of you. We're now at 42 people, doing better than planned on finances and having made major strides. We now think that we're setting a high bar for the industry in terms of communication, transparency, and governance. That was last quarter. Our focus this quarter is on the Vanguard release, which is our user alpha. We'll be talking about more of that in a bit. The launch of Tardigrade, which is a new brand and a new network associated with us. Our drive to public beta, and of course, we're going to continue to make progress on governance and, most excitingly, continue the significant activity that we're seeing in terms of demand. I'll turn it back to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Ben. Next up, we have branding, go-to-market, and SLA enforcement. Our speaker is John Sanderson, vice president of marketing. John?
Thank you, Jocelyn. I am excited to share some of our new brand strategies with the community. These are changes that impact how we launch into the market and how our different customer types are going to be interacting with us. Storj.io, our main website, is pulled in a lot of different directions, trying to accomplish so many different objectives to serve our customers, demand and technology partners, storage node operators, open source contributors, and of course our utility token governance and company news. We have several different reasons that have led us to the decision of creating a new website and brand in addition to Storj.io. The first is phonetics, online searchability, and word of mouth. Storj itself doesn't have great phonetics built into it, the way it's spelled. We've heard several variations, including Storj, storage, and the like. And this impacts our company's ability to easily be found online after word of mouth referrals. The second is that it's been used historically for several different things: our company name, product name, token, and almost all of our software. Online, our token content has dominated the rest when people search for us. We want to have a standalone brand that can be easily found, more easily referred to in word of mouth, and not associated with other parts of our company. Our foundation for this was to look at the key brand attributes for inspiration: durability, resiliency, performance, highly distributed, and the rest that you see here. Introducing Tardigrade.io. What you see here is an electron microscope image of a tardigrade, which is a microscopic organism found everywhere on Earth and almost in every extreme environment. They are credited with being the first to pioneer and survive new ecosystems. They're highly distributed themselves and found in extreme cold and water pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, living in volcanoes. They've survived the vacuum of space, and so on. They're often credited as being the toughest and most durable, resilient organisms on Earth. And I'd like to introduce the new logo for that brand and the website, which will be tardigrade.io. The last reason that I wanted to mention of why we thought about changing the brand is probably the most important. We are dedicated to providing high quality customer experiences for all of our customer types and believe that introducing another web property allows us to focus our content and experiences for everyone. Between now and production later this year, the main experiences are listed here and what websites will be serving which purposes. Customers buying cloud storage and our demand partners will have their sign up and support and documentation and more on tardigrade.io, which will be our curated network of enforced SLA nodes and satellites. Storj.io will remain the home for our token, storage node operators, open source contributors, and will be the home for our community for everyone on both lists. The last reason we're separating the brands is based around how we protect our SLAs and remain open source for everybody. We are committed to open source, transparency in our code, but we also have an objective to offer S3 performance to our customers, which means we need to protective measures in place in how our network performs. We're excited to see how our community sets up different networks using our open source code, but we will be restricting and auditing the satellites that join the tardigrade network to ensure we protect that network and that it meets the SLAs for our customers paying us to store their data. Uplink and storage node software will of course be very permissive. Tardigrade.io will continue to be built out over time and will follow our roadmap and milestones. So watch the website as it changes over time in the coming months. And of course, with the new brand and website also comes new social media accounts. We'd like everyone to follow us on tardigrade.io. And if you do, we're going to pick 2 random people anywhere in the world, and we're going to ship all of the tardigrade swag we've produced so far, one of each. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thanks, John. The next section we have is the Alpha update, and our presenter is JT Olio. JT is our Vice President of Engineering. JT?
Thank you, Jocelyn. So the last time you heard from me was talking about the development milestones of our various releases that we have planned from the end of last year through this year. At the end of last year, we launched our private alpha for our partners and a local test network that you could download and run locally on your computer. And in January, we launched our storage node alpha, where we started sending out invites on our waitlist to people who wanted to participate as a storage node on our network. Starting today, we're sending out invites for our Vanguard user alpha. While the Explorer release was about the supply side, the Vanguard release is about the demand side, and we'll be demoing that in just a second. So I'll come back to this slide in just a minute, but first I wanted to talk about how Q1 went. So our Explorer alpha, we've been sending out invites, as many as we safely can. The network has been growing. We went from 500 terabytes to over a petabyte in March. And there's currently 300 storage node operators on the network. We know there's lots more storage node operators in our waiting list, so thank you for your patience. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Metered invitations in groups are using signed certificates to ensure network stability. You can't join the network without using one of our signed certificates. Amazingly, even though we're in alpha, we have gotten enough of the system working that we have already successfully sent payments twice. So this is a paid storage node alpha. Our storage node operators are getting paid. If you're on the network already, we want feedback. Please file issues on GitHub about how the release is going. And if you have not yet gotten a waitlist invite yet, thank you for your patience, and we hope to be getting to you soon. Q2 is going to be all about our Vanguard release, and this is where people will be able to test the tardigrade side of our network for uplink developers. Users who are on the tardigrade side will be empowered to create accounts, make API keys, upload and download data, build applications against our library, look at usage reports. And we'll be demoing more of that in just a minute. We're actually really excited, especially about this release. We think that a lot of what we've been building has been leading up to this release, and so we're excited to see what people think. Expect deliberate network wipes of the alpha during the until the beta, though. While this is a product that we're proud of, it's still an alpha, and we're not committing to data stability yet. So coming up after the Vanguard release will be the Beacon release, where we'll add more identity and access management. Then the beta actually will launch as our Pioneer release. During the beta, we'll be making open source libraries, modules, and connections to other projects. And then our Voyager release is when we launch to production. So we're really excited about this timeline. We're on track. And to commemorate the Vanguard release, we want to show a brief demo.
Hello, in this demo we'd like to show the first release of the user interface for a satellite. And in this case we're demonstrating the user interface for the first tardigrade satellite, the Mars tardigrade satellite. As the waitlist progresses, you'll be getting invites if you're interested in joining the tardigrade network to create an account on one of our tardigrade satellites. I already have an account, so I'm going to just log in. Once you log in, you'll be seeing a project dashboard. Each satellite for each user account allows people to create and manage projects. And a project allows you to have a team where you invite other members to the team, and you can manage API keys, and you can manage your usage report, you can manage your billing history and payment setup, and we'll be adding more things down the road. In particular, we'll be adding a view to show your buckets. We won't be adding support for file management in this interface because that would require giving the satellite your encryption keys. So the project management interface will mostly be around access management. To demonstrate this, we're going to create an API key. So we'll call this my demo key. This API key will be usable in a few different places. This API key is usable both in our command line interface, in our library that we're releasing, libuplink, and our S3 compatible gateway that we've demonstrated a few times already. What we'll do is we'll copy this. We're going to configure our command line utility uplink to configure it to use this satellite. We'll use this API key. We'll pick an encryption passphrase. One of our upcoming releases, the Beacon release, will feature improvements to how we manage encryption passphrases and make it the user experience and both the security a little bit easier and more intuitive. So now that we've configured this command line interface, we're going to copy a video. First we're going to see if we have any buckets. We've got to make a bucket. Call it the test bucket. And now we'll see that it's in there. We're going to copy a video, the Storj intro video, into this test bucket. Okay, now let's copy it back out and make sure it worked. See that it's fast. Let's play it and see if it worked.
Imagine if the cloud wasn't up here, but down here with us.
It worked. So that's great. So this is how you configure and use the command line utility using the satellite web interface for creating and managing your users and your team. There's one other thing that I wanted to demonstrate today, which is a little bit more directly for the programmers, and that's the libuplink library that we're launching. The libuplink library we're actually really proud of, like everything else, but about its simplicity. We've bundled a ton of complexity around this decentralized network behind this very straightforward and hopefully easy to use library. The way that it works is you create an uplink, and an uplink, this is, I guess I should start and say, this is Go documentation. So this is for the Go programming language. We'll be adding language bindings for other languages coming up during the next few releases. But this library allows you to create an uplink, which will cache connections and cache various details about the network. You can open any specific project. You have to give a project, a specific project is configured to use a satellite and an API key. So once you have a satellite and an API key, as I demonstrated in the setup of the uplink, these are just creating a project, opening a project on the uplink. Once you have that, you'll have this project handle. A project handle allows you to create a bucket, delete a bucket, get information about a bucket, list buckets, and open a bucket. Opening a bucket gives you a bucket handle. Opening a bucket requires an encryption key, and that's the third part of this uplink setup is choosing the encryption key you use for the buckets from this command line. The encryption key, currently all you need to set is the storage key, but this setting, this encrypted path prefix, will become useful as we add more identity and access management features in an upcoming release. So opening a bucket will give you a bucket handle. And a bucket handle allows you to upload objects, list objects, delete objects, and open objects. And opening objects, oops, that's the code. Opening objects gives you access to downloading the object. You get information about the object, you get all the information that you've stored about it, but you can also download any arbitrary range within that object. So that allows you to stream videos straight out of the network, as we've demonstrated before. So again, we're really proud of this library. This will be getting released as part of the Vanguard release, and again, we're just really excited to have all of you on board as soon as possible to be able to create accounts. We'll be sending out the waitlist invites as fast as we can. But thank you for watching this demo. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thanks, JT. Next up, we have governance with Ben Golub. Ben is our interim CEO and executive chairman. Ben?
Thank you, Jocelyn. It should be obvious our main focus as a company is to build the world's best decentralized storage network and provide highly durable, highly performant, highly economical storage that serves as an alternative to the centralized solutions that are out there. However, key to running that network is the token. And we think it's important for storage node operators and customers to have confidence in the token, which is why we've also made it a priority to set the bar high in terms of how we do governance and transparency. As you'll recall from the last town hall, we implemented a number of things in order to set that bar high, which includes hiring people whose focus is on token and token governance, and we'll be meeting one of them today. Having a regular cadence of communication to the outside world, putting in place strong cryptographic controls, and making sure that we on a regular basis publish a token report that lets you understand where our tokens are, how they're being used, and what you can expect in the future. We've also implemented insider trader policy for those people who work for Storj and what they can and can't do with Storj. And we've changed our time lock to give more visibility into the usage in the future. We've shifted from 100% every 6 months to a rolling 8-quarter lock. We'll be talking about all of these. But the one that I'm most excited to talk about is Catherine Johnson, who has joined the board of Storj, and I'd like to turn it over to Catherine to share a pre-recorded announcement.
Hello, my name is Catherine Johnson. I'm pleased to have joined the Storj Board of Directors earlier this year. I've worked in legal and regulatory compliance roles for the past 20 years. I'm currently Director of Compliance Regulation at Coinbase. Last year, I helped form a diversity and inclusion employee resource group. I learned of Storj's work and leadership through several colleagues and was impressed with what I heard. For the ERG's inaugural event, we invited Sean Wilkinson to come talk about his journey. I had the good fortune then to meet both Sean and Ben during their visit to Coinbase. At that time, I got to learn even more about the exciting work of this company, including its commitment to compliance and transparency. I look forward to supporting Storj to further develop its transparent token governance strategy and build even stronger community with our token holders and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. As you can tell, we're very excited about having Catherine on board. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge, both around the area of compliance, as well as being a leader in diversity and inclusion, which of course is very important to us. Now turning to the token balances and flows report. This is the third time you're seeing this report. It's been updated from where we were in December at the end of last year to now, and every subsequent report that we give will be based off of previous quarter to the next. Highlights, we, as you know, had 75.1 million tokens released in our token sale, exactly 0 of which were given to employees or used on Lamborghinis. We had a reserve of 50 million tokens to convert our old counterparty token SJCX. There's now approximately 6.9 million tokens left to be converted, but we saw almost no activity in Q1. And then there's the area of operating supply, and this is what we expect to be the main driver of usage going forward. We had 48.4 million tokens in our operating supply at the beginning of 2019. we've used approximately 2.1, and that's spread across network operations, service provider payments, and an internal program that we use to align our employees and their bonuses to network performance. We've got a long-term lockup, and that number remains the same. We haven't used any of the tokens from our lockup, but we have changed the nature of that lockup, which I'll talk about in a bit. So in summary, the non-circulating supply went down by 2.1 million, driven entirely by what happened in our operating supply. And the total storage supply that will ever be in market, of course, is 425 million. Speaking about the time lock, as we shared in the last town hall, we moved from a pattern where we had 100% of our 245 million tokens in time lock relocked every 6 months for another 6 months. We have since switched to a process where we've taken that 245 million tokens, divided it up into 8 different tranches of 30.6 million tokens each. And the expiration dates for those tranches are spread out each quarter over the course of 2 years. At the end of this quarter, we followed our expected pattern, which is we took the 30.6 million tokens in tranche 1 and re-signed them so that they now expire the time lock expires in Q1 of 21. Now, I know that while cryptocurrency community is worldwide, a lot of the people in the community act as if they're from Missouri and say, show me. So to give you the ability to trust but verify, we are providing all of the addresses for those time lock tranches so that you can verify exactly how much is in each of those tranches and when they expire. And we previously provided you with the addresses of all of our other major wallets so that you can confirm our holdings. And with that, I'll turn things over to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Ben. The next section we have up is the V3 network waitlist update. And our speaker is John Gleason. John's our Vice President of Operations. John, please take it away.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Well, the wait for the V3 network has been very long, a lot longer than we expected when we first started out that project. But we're happy to see that thousands of people have joined both our waitlist for the storage node operator as well as the developer side. And so while we're working through the list slowly at first, the good news is we'll be picking up the pace as we move along. And right now we're moving through those lists as fast as we possibly can. But let me talk first about the V3 storage node waitlist. So that waitlist was started in July of 2018. And we've recently started sending out those invitations in February. We send invitations to a maximum of about 50% of the daily active node count each day. And we're growing that network slowly at first to make sure we grow in a healthy way. Onboarding is a little technical right now, but over the next series of releases, you can expect that to get a lot easier until we've reached a size where we can drop the requirement for those certificates and any nodes can join. Now on the V3 network developer waitlist, again, we've got a very long waitlist that started in February of 2018. And those V3 invitations are starting this month. And we'll be sending those invitations initially to the private alpha participants and then work very quickly through the waitlist. So watch your email for those. And of course, during that process, storage and bandwidth will be free to public alpha participants. So you'll be capped, but you won't be charged. We will continue to pay our storage node operators for all of that data. And speaking of that data, with the Explorer release, we were focused on establishing that a stable base for the last month or two to get sort of a group of storage nodes operational. But with Vanguard release, we can really open the floodgates on that data. So both storage and the private alpha participants will be loading up the network. So storage node operators, you can expect to see a whole lot more data starting this month. So that's all I've got for our update. Jocelyn, back to you.
Thanks, John. Our next section is the Q&A with the storage team. And joining us are Sean Wilkinson, the founder and chief strategy officer, as well as Catherine Johnson, board member.
Hello, welcome, wonderful storage community. It's time for the best part of the town hall, the Q&A session. So let's go ahead and get started. The questions that's been asked and prepared. All right, we're ready to go.
Thanks, Sean. So we're back live in the studio, and we're going to the Q&A section. We have a whole bunch of the team members here, and we're going to be handing them off to appropriate people as we go through. I'm going to kick off with the first question, and that is, one we received in advance, which is, are you looking to list your token on, the name has been redacted, please let me know.
So we get a lot of inquiries about whether we want to be listed on exchanges, and the availability of the Storj token on exchanges certainly helps to facilitate the utility of the token by allowing those who want to use Storj tokens to pay for storage to acquire those in the open market, and also to allow storage node operators who earn Storj tokens in exchange for their excess storage capacity and bandwidth to liquidate those tokens if they don't need cloud storage. Of course, we welcome any exchange that wants to support our utility token and our ecosystem, although we do not financially incentivize exchanges.
Okay, I'm going to read out the second question. And just, first I want to say thank you to everybody who's been sending in questions. We received over 20 questions in advance. It seems like every time that we do the town hall, it's getting better and better. And, that chance to receive the questions in advance lets us think about giving you really thoughtful answers that are going to meet the needs that you have for the information. So we really, really appreciate it if you can send in the questions early. So a special shout out to everyone who has been doing that. Again, we are taking questions live as we go though. So if you look in your email that we sent out, you should have a link, but the link to send questions to is ask@storj.io, and you can send all of your questions there. Okay, so I'm just going to move ahead to the next question now. Question 2 is, what is the difference between MinIO and Storj in terms of how the storage is being done? So this person is saying that Storj looks almost similar to MinIO, except it provides the ecosystem like Uber, Lyft, where we have the supply and demand. MinIO does erasure encoding and has built-in encryption as well. So I'm going to kick that question to John Gleason. What is the difference between them and Storj, please?
So MinIO is software that's designed to create an interface to a data store that's S3 compatible. It supports erasure codes and encryption, but it's not actually a data store in and of itself. MinIO provides a host of benefits, including that S3 compatible interface. And just as a interesting point, we use MinIO for our S3 compatible gateway. And although we use our own encryption layer and our own erasure codings, the biggest difference is that we have the network behind it, and we actually store the data, and we provide that central point. But otherwise, yeah, we're big fans of MinIO and what they do, and it's just a different animal solving a different problem.
Great, John. I'm going to move ahead to question 3. And that is, what's the recommended method for storage node operators to convert their storage token payout to US dollars? So they're assuming that behind the scenes, a conversion to storage token is being made to pay the operator. And where are those tokens coming from? And I think this is a good question for John Gleason, but also Ben Golub. I'd love to hear you weigh in on this.
Sure. So in terms of actually converting the tokens from Storj USD, we don't really have a specific recommendation. Most of the time, it's a 2-step process where the storage tokens are converted to something more liquid, not a utility token, but a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And then that Bitcoin or Ethereum is liquidated for cash. But we do not have a specific methodology. It's just like any other token on the market. It's really up to the storage node operator what's the best way for them.
Great. Ben, thoughts?
So I think that's a great answer. There's one other use case, of course, which is a number of our storage node operators are also interested in storing on the storage network. And so we do have a number of storage node operators who have been speaking to us about making it really easy for them to receive tokens for the outside storage that they provide, as well as be able to convert that back into storage on the network so that they can use the storage network as their hot backup or their disaster recovery.
Okay, thank you. Moving ahead to the next question. This is one that we've actually answered previously. So for questions that we have already answered, we're putting together a special blog that's going to be going up next week. And we'll be sending that out to everyone that registered, as well as placing that link on the YouTube playback. So this question just was about storage tokens and fiat. And in the interest of time, we're going to go and move forward to a fresh question. And that is, if someone has an IP with about 500 Mbps and they're running a bunch of Raspberry Pis. A single huge node requires the use of RAID, as one doesn't want to lose the entire array because of a single failure. So this means the total capacity would be lower. Using one node per hard drive like V2 results in higher total capacity with one failed hard drive taking down the one small node attached to it. I think this is an appropriate question for JT. JT Olio, our Vice President of Engineering, would you like to give an answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So during the alpha, we've continued our advice that we request people run one node, and that's mostly just for helping make sure that as we send out invites, we're able to share as much of the alpha network with as many operators as possible. But in the long term, once we're in production, the Storj v3 network is performing many of the functions of RAID directly at a higher level, and so there's not really a lot to be gained holistically when you consider the network altogether from having the storage node operators individually run RAID. Sort of in the long term, it kind of makes more sense to actually have each storage node be considered a separate failure domain, where if a hard drive fails, that node fails. And if you have thousands of hard drives, we're leaning towards a model where we would prefer that you have thousands of nodes instead of just one node with thousands of hard drives in it. So, and during the alpha, we're trying to sort of do a one node per person type thing, but ultimately our intentions going forward are to have, not have petabytes of data on one node, but petabytes of data on thousands of, hundreds of thousands of nodes perhaps.
Okay, great. And people who are interested in that topic can also read more about it in our blog. Let's go to the next question. Is there any incentive for the proof of work if the node is running on a multiple CPU core platform, or the software will specifically use only one CPU core? If the answer is yes, can you describe how important the computing power is? And they're also asking about bandwidth allocation and download upload speeds. Now, I think this is also a JT question, and I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about proof of work.
Sure. So yeah, just briefly to just sort of address how we use proof of work in the network. The way that the network uses proof of work is actually only for a form of network gating to defend against a light defense against Sybil attacks. We have a few other mechanisms for defending against Sybil attacks, but proof of work itself is actually a one-time operation for joining our network. And once you're on the network, you can actually do that proof of work on whatever computer you'd like, and you can then transfer that identity that you've generated to your direct storage node. So the proof of work has nothing really to do with the CPU power of the storage node itself. Our software is written in Go, and so we are a multi-core parallel software product. This is not something where it's a single-threaded process. Multiple cores will help in the sort of work that the CPU has to do, but we hope to be able to provide a storage node platform that will run on a variety of different architectures and platforms, all the way from Raspberry Pis, of course, to server farms. So ultimately, we want to be able to benefit from multiple cores, but we don't expect to do a lot of CPU work on storage nodes directly. In terms of the bandwidth allocation question, ultimately the way that bandwidth allocation works is storage nodes advertise how much bandwidth they have available. And that advertisement is a calculation based on a configuration that you provide. So a storage node operator can configure the storage node how much bandwidth they want to provide. There actually isn't any bandwidth allocation assessment currently. That is something that we may add down the road. But right now, storage node operators just configure the storage node with how much bandwidth they want to use for the month. And that is the amount of bandwidth that the storage node advertised. And that's the amount of bandwidth that the satellite attempts to use from that storage node.
Okay, great. Thanks, JT.
It can change during the middle of the month to answer that final part of the question. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Now, this is a topic that comes up periodically where people are asking about numbers. So given that it can be expensive to get going, how can someone make sure that there's enough revenue to pay for all of the usage? I think that this is potentially a JT question, and I think also if John Gleason would like to weigh in, you might have something to say about it, but I'm going to kick it to JT.
Yeah, so I guess I'll probably say the same thing John might end up saying as well, which is that we have a calculator that we've created. That once you sort of have a good idea of your resources, the calculator will be able to tell you sort of rough estimates of what the monthly payouts would be. And to be honest, running a storage node is not for everybody. We want to make the storage node operation as seamless and as pleasant and as financially viable for everyone as possible. But there are certain cases where perhaps you have really aggressive bandwidth caps, or you have really expensive electricity, or your bandwidth is maybe expensive. And in that case, I think it really makes sense to sit down with the calculator and figure out what resource combinations will make the most sense for you. Ultimately, so input outputs per second for our devices. We don't currently have minimums. That's true. Ultimately, that's something that we'll eventually need to start talking about what storage node operators need to provide. But this is actually one of the benefits of one of the answers to the previous questions, which is we want to spread data across more storage nodes than having larger, fewer storage nodes. The more storage nodes we have, the more parallelism we have, and the more operations per second our network will be able to do per byte. So again, that's still, we're still in alpha. We still have some things to work out, but ultimately we're not setting really aggressive targets for storage node operators on input outputs IOPS per second right now, simply because we're really planning to make the most use of the parallelism that we already have inherently available in the network for the foreseeable future.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question. I'm going to use FreeNAS as my platform. Will there be an official Docker image available? JT?
Yes. Right now, there is already an official Docker image. We are currently, one of the problems with the Docker image is it actually makes it challenging for Windows Home users. So we're also going to start supporting releases that don't require Docker. We will continue to support as many different ways as is viable to provide support for storage node operators who want to run the storage node software on their NAS device, on their desktop computer. We want to support Windows, OS X, Linux, a bunch of different architectures, and we're going to, over time, increase the availability of ease of use and different ways of installing the software. I'm confident Docker will remain one of those things.
Great, thanks. So we're moving ahead to a community question number 9. Good morning. I filled out the form for waitlist months ago. I wanted to understand if it's possible to understand the position in the list. So this person wants to know when they're going to be invited to V3. And then obviously I removed their email address. But I think there's a lot of people who have the same question. Luckily, we have John Sanderson, our Vice President of Marketing, in the studio. So I'm going to turn it over to him. John?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we have a couple different people who've asked this question quite often. So what we've decided is actually we're going to publish where everyone is in their wait list. So be on the lookout for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be creating zones, most likely in either batches or waves of 250 to 500, and then informing which zone you're in relation to everybody else. It's possible that if we didn't clarify this on the town hall earlier, if JT or JG want to maybe add some context around the acceleration of our wait lists and what's kind of contributing to people being confused why they're there, but they will soon know where they're at.
Yeah, and I think earlier in the presentation I talked a little bit about what the rationale was for growing slowly, but again, we will be picking up the pace pretty quickly, and so we've already been sending out invites to the storage node operators, and we're sending out a few more each day as we grow the number of nodes. But we're going to start first with our private network partners to get them onto the alpha. And as we become more confident in that experience and the stability of the network, we'll be simply just ramping that up and onboarding people as quickly as we can. And we really do appreciate the patience, and we're just thrilled by the level of interest that we've gotten in terms of just how many people signed up.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Thank you, John. Next question. This person has questions about HDD mining. Is internet speed important? What's the minimum upload download? Is there a chance to add after the start? And is 100 terabytes too much for starting in terms of filling the area? This sounds like a question for JT Olio. JT?
Hello. So the internet speed is very important. Probably the metric that we're most interested in is actually your overall bandwidth availability over the course of a month. Internet speed of actually per node, since we're distributing the load across all of these nodes to read a lot of data from 80 storage nodes at a time actually doesn't require that much throughput from each individual node to add up to an aggregate throughput of much faster. So the internet speed is important. We are wanting, we'll probably be, as we come out of alpha into beta, we'll be a little bit more specific about what minimum internet speeds are. But I guess what I would say is for people who are interested in participating, the message that I want to say is the minimum amount of monthly bandwidth usage. I think our calculator starts with a minimum calculation of 1 terabyte of bandwidth a month, which there are some ISPs that have internet caps of that much. So that's probably more of an important criteria for considering your bandwidth when you're making purchasing decisions about your ISP if you want to participate in storage. You can absolutely add hard drive space after the start. Again, just like the bandwidth settings, that's something that you can configure anytime you restart your storage node for maintenance. 100 terabytes does feel a little bit much. Right now we're advertising, it looks like for our current network, we're at about maybe about 4 terabytes on average per storage node that storage node operators are providing. And again, in the sort of longer term, we are anticipating that we'd rather have people run more storage nodes than storage nodes that have 400 terabytes or something like that. So 100 terabytes, I'd probably say wait until you can come up on the wait list a few more times before adding that much hard drive space.
Okay, thanks. Next question. I'll be kicking this one over to John Gleason. John, what's the current cost of storage? For example, 1 terabyte a month. So this person has sort of 2 things that are on their mind. In the first place, they're looking at SIA, and according to their website, there's a certain price, and then they're looking at that in comparison to their estimation of storage's price at $20, assuming 1 terabyte for monthly storage and 100 gig for data transfer. How do you view this contrast? And then their second add-on question is, how much income does the storage node get for 1 terabyte per month? What about the satellites? And what's the income distribution structure? John?
That's a lot of question.
It is a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions.
You can handle it.
I can handle it. Okay. So in order to have a healthy network that's profitable for our storage node operators, we of course have to have a platform that attracts a lot of demand from our customers. And we have to provide reliable, secure, performant network that is also cost effective. So we're committed to offering a network that's competitively priced, that's durable and reliable, of course, and that's also economically viable for both storage and the network of storage node operators. To be honest, with V2, we weren't able to do that. With V3, we're much better positioned. So we've published a number of blog posts this year that explain how storage nodes earn storage tokens for the sharing of the bandwidth and storage space. And we published a calculator to help prospective storage node operators understand how much they can earn. It's really important to the network that operating a storage node is economically viable. Now, with regard to SiaCoin and the other distributed decentralized providers out there, the comparison seems to be somewhat complicated because it's difficult to compare scenarios that require the operation of a full node, transactions that are entirely in token, and that have different costs associated with them, for example, for ingress and repair, as opposed to just storage and egress like everybody else. Now, we've designed storage to be easy to use for developers who need a reliable, performance, secure, and economical storage. We're S3 compatible at a fraction of the price of cloud providers. So even though we haven't published pricing for the V3 network yet, you can expect the same transparency that we've done with a storage node calculator with a pricing calculator for storage. And we'll provide simple pricing that demonstrates the value of tardigrade storage.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move along to the next question. So question 12 is from a person who thinks storage may be underestimated now and wants to try to value storage. Could you please offer me the following data: the number of users in storage nodes over time, the space of used storage over time, and platform revenue over time for storage nodes and satellites? I think this question is appropriate for Ben Golub. Ben?
Thank you. So I think we should clarify that in our history, we had the V2 network, which scaled up to a fairly large scale. We have then been shrinking the V2 network as we've been working on V3. V3 is still in alpha. So we can talk about the V2 network and say that at its peak, we got to over 100,000 storage node operators, close to 150 petabytes. We believe that V3 will ultimately be much larger, but also much healthier. It's a fraction of that size right now. one of the things that we do right now in order to provide more transparency is the token report, which gives you some sense of the volume of payouts that are happening, which is a fairly small number right now. It will ramp through the alpha. We believe ramp much more quickly during the beta. And then, as you heard us discuss earlier, we've seen tremendous built up demand for a service like Storj. And we have a large number of customers and potential customers and partners who are looking to load onto the network just as soon as we can get it fully operational and have the proof that it will provide the level of performant, durable, and economical storage that we believe it needs to have.
Great, thanks. I'd also love to hear from Sean Wilkinson. Sean's our founder and Chief Strategy Officer. Sean?
That's an excellent question. So I did want to give just a little bit of insight of what we are working on to that vein. V3 is still in alpha, and it's very new, and so we have a lot of new data sources and information that we're working on, visualizing and kind of distributing both internally in the company and to the community. So right now we're actually working on essentially a dashboard that would show things like number of users or storage nodes. So that's something that we are working on right now, and we'd like to get out to the community so you can kind of see these stats. We had this on the V2 network. Obviously, there's a lot of changes, so we're kind of rebuilding those tools so you can see that very important data. So just wanted to let you know that that's something that we are working on providing to the community. It's just going to take us a little bit of technical time to kind of rebuild those visualization tools.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean. Let's go ahead to the next question. Okay, this is a long one, so I'm going to paraphrase, but we're leaving the full question intact. So sometimes if you see a little oddities with spelling or formatting, it's because we do leave the questions in the way that they were asked. We try to be completely transparent. In V2 at the beginning, there were no published limits to how someone could participate. Storj gained experience and Sybil attacks became a real threat. So Storj began to publish limits to farmers' participation. How will a player's availability be limited with V3? Specifically, how do the nodes behave? Are they multi-threaded? How will a player be limited at a single location, for example, IP address? And how will a player be limited who has multiple locations? I feel that this is a good question for Ben Golub. Ben, would you like to take it?
Certainly, I can answer some of these questions, and I think we can. I'll turn it over to JT for a bit more detail. But one of the major impetuses behind the move to V3 was to design a network that was far more resistant to fraud, and also made sure that the incentives were correct, so that in the V3 network we incent people to provide high quality nodes with high quality bandwidth, and we've eliminated a number of the attacks, including, by the way, Sybil attacks and others. I think that it may make sense for JT to provide a little bit more detail on some of the specific things that we're doing to make our network more fraud resistant.
Yeah, great. So yeah, just to answer question A, actually a throwback to one of the previous questions, we are multi-threaded. We are trying to make all of our nodes automatically scale to demand. In terms of how nodes are limited, we aren't actually limiting what data goes to nodes that are qualified. There's a section in the white paper that you can read about node disqualification. But for nodes that are valid for data storage and are still passing audits, what we do is we want to geographically distribute the data as much as possible. And in terms of trust boundaries and failure domains, we want the data to be distributed in a way where it is as resilient and as independent of any of any specific set of failures as possible. And so the way to do that is when data is uploaded, we try and avoid storing data on the same IP address or by the same operator. So an operator can run multiple storage nodes once we get to production, behind multiple IP addresses, behind the same IP address, we won't have those sorts of restrictions once we get to production. But the data won't actually be uploaded to all of those for the same times and at the same rate. So ultimately, again, it's not a limit, but it really will end up becoming a behavior that the network sort of institutes, which is that uploads do try and disperse themselves across operators and across IP addresses and across geographies as much as possible. And we wouldn't want a hurricane taking out, in addition to, houses, a bunch of people's data. So I guess that's what I would say for A through C of this question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. We've heard mention of satellites. How can a person apply to participate if they believe that they have the infrastructure and or expertise to be a benefit to the satellite system? And then they go on to say that they are really looking forward to joining in and our upcoming things. So it seems like there's several of you that could weigh in on this much discussed topic of satellites, but Ben, would you like to take it?
Sure. So as just again to clarify, there are really three different roles in the storage ecosystem. There are the customers, people who are uploading data. Those are, we sort of talk about those as uplink. There are the people who are running and providing, who are running disk drives and providing excess capacity. We talked about those as storage node operators. And then this person has absolutely correctly identified who the satellites are. And of course, the bar for running a satellite is much higher than the bar for running a storage node. If we have a network composed of high quality satellites that operate in a manner that allows us to maintain a high SLA, that's a really important thing to us. So part of what you heard from John Sanderson earlier on is the notion of a tardigrade network. And this is a curated set of satellites where we will have requirements and rules and the ability for people to prove themselves. And those are rules not only for how you operate the satellite, but also ensuring that there are guarantees in terms of payment to storage node operators. When we launch V3, there will be a number of different satellites that are operated by Storj Labs. We will extend that very quickly to a set of partners who will meet criteria, and we'll be publishing those criteria. And then, of course, there is always a possibility, if somebody doesn't want to participate in the tardigrade network, to create separate networks using the Storj open source code. And you can create non-tardigrade satellites as well. And there are, of course, no restrictions on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go ahead to question 15. How many drives in a set can be redundant? What happens if you lose one more than that number, assuming that your model is distributed over multiple WAN links? Regarding availability, it's proportionate to connectivity. And of course, you will only ever have as much connectivity as you have. This is something that I believe we've addressed in a blog. I'm going to kick it quickly to JT. Would you like to take it?
Sure. So the way that files are currently uploaded, there's a number of different mechanisms that a network such as ours could choose for adding redundancy. You can divide nodes into sets first and then choose a set and then upload data to that set of nodes, or you can just sort of spray files across all of the nodes. And actually what ends up happening if you do the spray approach, which is what we do, it actually increases variability to some degree in an effort to sort of improve the mean of your durability of those files. It's something that we could maybe go into in a blog post at some point. But ultimately, the way to counteract some of those behaviors is to just increase your read-Solomon erasure code numbers to the point where your durability sort of wipes away a lot of those issues. Really, it's kind of interesting how much of an effect tuning your read-Solomon numbers can have on your overall durability. And so to answer this question specifically, right now, we're still tuning these numbers, but right now, for any file we upload 85 pieces where you only need any 29 of them to continue to be able to recover the file. So, whatever the math is, 85 minus 29 is how many drives in a set can be redundant. If you lose more than that number, if you do lose more than that amount, then the file is lost, which is why we're fortunate enough to already have a repair system that is constantly watching the network. Each satellite watches networks that the network for files it's responsible for and repairs those files. So we have a number of thresholds that have to be breached before there's any risk to the file, and the repair system is constantly looking for objects in that state and fixing them before there's anywhere near risk of a problem.
Great, thanks. All right, question 16. And I believe this may actually have been inspired by a blog post that we made. How does the IRS authenticate who one is with a digital wallet? the funds are being deposited into every month. Do we disclose our wallet info to the IRS then? Ben, I'd like you to take this question, please.
Sure. So this applies to people who are operating storage nodes inside the United States who are U.S. taxpayers. So for the rest of you, you can take a minute break. Also, it's tax day in the United States on April 15th, so this may be on a lot of people's minds. So the rules, IRS rules in the United States are that if we pay a supplier more than $600, 600 US dollars worth, we need to file a 1099 form, which is a form that we both send to the government as well as to the person who's operating the node, telling them how much we've sent them over the course of the year. What that means in practice is that if a node wants to receive more than $600 from us, and it's a node that's operating in the United States, we'll have to ask them to provide information such as their taxpayer ID number. And if it's not provided and it's running in the United States, then we unfortunately won't be able to send more than $600 worth of business to them over the course of the year. And if you are a US taxpayer operating outside the United States, then of course you should also register as well if you want to be compliant.
Great, thanks. And people who would like to see that in more detail are able to find that information on our blog, and we'll be placing that link in the description. Next question is one that has been previously addressed. We're talking about taxes here. So I'm going to keep moving forward and go to question 18, and that is a person who's interested in using a file server with 100 terabytes and 1 gig internet connection. They would like to know, are they limited to one server of 24 terabytes and a connection of 200 gig? This person is just looking for ways to generate a little extra revenue on the side. Let us...
Jocelyn,
yes?
take this one?
Why don't you take this one, John? Thanks.
I'll do that.
This is John Gleason speaking.
Yeah, so I think really what we're looking at here is we've heard from JT a number of times about how, really a lot of smaller storage nodes with a lot of bandwidth available is really the most healthy thing for the network. But we have actually published a number of blog posts in terms of how storage node operators can calculate how much they'll earn. And also we've published a calculator that sort of lets you estimate those earnings. Now, as far as how much you can actually earn, one huge factor that's very significant here is the demand from our customers. And so while storage node operators can estimate their theoretical possible earnings using the calculator, those earnings are highly dependent on the actual traffic and storage and bandwidth on the network used. And so I'd encourage anybody who's curious about this, go try out the calculator and see what it is, but then tell all your friends to start storing data on storage and help drive demand to our network. I think that's probably the most effective thing you can do. And then good luck in your retirement.
Okay, thanks, John. This next question was from a person who had looked at the product roadmap and seen that Vanguard is geared towards developers. They're wondering about the milestones that are coming after that and basically how we are prioritizing offering something to the farmers versus something to the developers. This is something that we actually talk quite a lot about in our communication, so you can check our blog for information regarding that. I would say that the short answer is that every release has something new for storage node operators and farmers. So I'm going to go and move ahead to the next question. And this question is, in V2, we had a level DB database. When they started Storj, they began with a ZFS file system and found that they hadn't designed it around how the level DB was implemented. So it looks like they did some experimentation, and then they found that at that point, they were a little too late to be able to make effective changes for better availability. So this person is trying really hard to optimize and do all the right stuff. And their question is, how can they adequately plan, and what's the database structure scheme of V3?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with V3, one of the things that we sort of chose as a design goal off the bat was that V3 is going to be designed mainly for larger files. We're making an object storage system and not a relational database or a key value store. And so because this is a sort of an object storage system for larger objects, we're kind of targeting that kind of the minimum size of objects that end up getting stored in the network are sort of on average, like at least, a couple megabytes or more. And so what that means is that when we break that up with Reed Solomon, we're starting to talk about like the object sizes that you'll see on the storage node are but somewhere between, half a megabyte and 64 megabytes or so. And so those objects actually end up in a lot of cases being easiest and best and most performant to just store them straight on the file system. And so we're not using a database structure for objects in storage nodes on V3. We are storing the objects that the V3 storage node software stores just directly on disk. So if you're using ZFS, it's likely, we've been trying to customize our software so that it will work with many file systems, ZFS, ext4, we want people to be able to use Windows and Macs. And so we're trying really hard to target file sizes in a structure that will work well for everybody without intensive customization. So hopefully this isn't something that you'll need to worry about with V3.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question. Hi, Team Storj. I'm a pretty huge fan, and I would love to host meetups with you guys across Europe and perhaps other parts of the world too. First, thank you. We love huge fans, and we are very interested in hosting meetups in many places, including Europe. So I'm going to take this question myself. The best thing that you can do is actually join our community and get active, make contacts with people who are in your region, and then just reach out and announce your intent that you would like to create a meetup, and I will help you to do that. I'm the community manager for Storj, and it's literally what I live for every day. I think Sean looks like he's dying to say something. So Sean, I'm going to kick it over to you for a sec.
We're super excited that you love to help us host some meetups. I definitely want to know more information about that. I'm definitely overdue for a trip to Europe, so might see you there. Just let us know what makes sense, and we'll kind of organize with you.
Okay, great. Actually, John Sanderson, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah,
Sanderson's our head of marketing, vice president.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we just to reiterate, we're super excited about having everybody join meetups. The same link that we use for questions, Town Hall, is a great way to ask at storj.io to submit your desire. But I want to reiterate that Jocelyn's our community manager. The best thing to do is join our community and start engaging with some of the moderators and admins to kind of build a relationship with us. We have a lot of people who've worked with us on V2 and promoting us and getting us out there. And we'd like to extend that nature beyond to V3.
Great, thanks. Okay, let's move to the next question. With regulation from government agencies potentially impacting companies with tokens and cryptocurrencies, what is Storj doing to stay on top of potential compliance issues? This is a question that I would like to actually kick over to several people. We have Catherine Johnson, who's a Storj board member and has deep expertise in this area, as well as John Gleason. And Ben, if you have any thoughts or comments, we'd love to hear them from you as well.
Thank you, Jocelyn. That's a really great question. And it's something that not surprisingly, we talk about on an ongoing basis. So as we all know, cryptocurrency is in its very early stages, and that means we're operating in a regulatory landscape that's still developing. That said, there are ways that we can work toward our goal of being a leader in token governance and regulatory compliance. And on that note, I wanted to just take a moment and say how glad I am to be here. I've made a point in my career in working with compliance leaders, and Storj is no exception. So I want to take a second just to laud Ben's and Storj's leadership here and the company's efforts in this regard. For this and many other reasons, I'm really honored to be a part of this community. So earlier, Ben spoke to some of the ways we're staying ahead of the compliance curve, including adding governance and compliance expertise, having transparent and open communications with our community, maintaining strong cryptographic controls and token governance, and articulating insider trading restrictions. In addition to this, we keep pace with regulatory guidance in other ways. We have on retainer one of the leading law firms with expertise in this area. We have regular check-ins with them to stay ahead of the curve. We also watch closely for regulatory guidance and action. You may be aware that last week, the SEC's Strategic Hub for Innovation and Financial Technology, known as FinHub, published on its website a framework for investment contract analysis of digital assets. So this is a 13-page framework or tool to help market participants assess whether a token is a security. The same day, the SEC's Division of Corporation Finance issued a response to a no-action request. It described circumstances where the SEC would not pursue an enforcement action in those particular circumstances. It's at a very high bar, but it is, it addresses those particular circumstances. So these are the sorts of developments that we assess on an ongoing basis to determine their impact to us and also to help guide our actions. In addition to this, we have ongoing participation by executives, board members, and others in industry conferences, events, and groups. This does several things. It helps us learn from others and share industry best practices. And also working with others, we have an opportunity to encourage regulatory clarity and have a greater voice. It also establishes ourselves as leaders in governance and compliance. So in this and other ways, we're taking steps to stay on potential compliance issues, even where the regulation is still developing.
Well, thank you, Catherine. This is Ben. I think the only thing I could have to add to that excellent and comprehensive answer is that in addition to everything else that Catherine has mentioned, of course, we're very excited to have Catherine join us to provide the level of expertise and insight that you just heard in that answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move ahead. The next question is, what kinds of internal policies does Storj have for employees related to compliance and token governance? I think that this is actually potentially another question that would be appropriate for Catherine Johnson to answer.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. This is another terrific question. And there are several things that we're doing that I'd like to highlight. Now, Ben mentioned earlier the digital asset trading policy. It's a really important policy, so I want to talk a little bit more about it. It covers employees, officers, directors, and other covered persons. Very generally, it helps people understand what the rules are, what they can and can't do with the information they obtain. This policy is designed to protect against misuse of what's called material non-public information, or MNPI. It identifies prohibited transactions. It establishes rules to protect against insider trading, including blackout periods. It also describes procedures if there's ever a case of inadvertent disclosure of an MNPI. And it sets forth measures to ensure compliance by including annual holdings reporting and other steps the company can take to assess activity for compliance with the policy. There are a few other policies that I want to mention. One is the Storj Treasury policy, which provides for the quarterly token report and the lockup for tokens in cold storage that Ben described. There's also the digital asset key management policy, which identifies key personnel and responsibilities. It describes security protocols and processes for digital asset storage. And then also very exciting for Storj employees is the token salary program, which allows employees to take a portion of their salary in Storj token. So much.
This actually brings us to the end of our pre-collected, whoops, sorry, there is one more. And the next question is, are there any plans for Bitcoin Lightning payments for node operators? And I'm going to give this one to Sean Wilkinson.
Hello again. So we've evaluated many different types of micropayment networks and architectures for essentially paying node operators, Lightning being one of them. But as of now, the one that looks most promising and that we are currently doing development on is Raiden. So that's the one that makes the most sense for us, that allows us to send Storj token payments, whereas something like Bitcoin Lightning Network, which is a really great framework for micropayments, doesn't allow us to use our native token storage for payments. So maybe, in the future, many years, we might consider looking at other micropayment networks. But for right now, as far as our architecture and what we're working on is concerned, we're just really looking at Raiden and developing on Raiden for micropayment channels, again, because it supports our native token.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So this brings us to the end of our pre-collected questions. I wanted to give a special Storj shout out to Robbie Medford and Jeremy Medford. They are two brothers in the community who approached us with some really fantastic questions that actually sparked a lot of conversation internally at Storj. So when those questions came in, I brought them to JT, who's our Vice President of Engineering, and that sparked a whole line of discussion within engineering. And we really appreciate those thought-provoking questions that come up, and they help us make ourselves better. So in appreciation for that, we're going to be sending each of you a full swag collection of all of our newly produced tardigrade merch. We have a t-shirt and a hoodie and a really high quality backpack. If you can't see from the picture, it's really nice. We have the tardigrade sippy cup with a metal straw. And we're just really excited to be sharing that with both of you. So please do contact us with your mailing address and we'll get those packages into the mail as soon as possible. Thank you so much. Moving on here, we are going to start answering some community questions. And these are questions that came in live during the earlier part of the presentation that we're giving right now. So I'm going to skip over to the first of those questions. And that is, hi guys, will there be a method to migrate storage to another hardware?
First off, not all guys. But secondly, we are going to be working on making sure that the user experience for the storage nodes is as wonderful and as beautiful as possible. For our storage node operators are obviously the bread and butter of what we're building, and so making sure that the user experience for maintaining their the best reputation that they can build is really important. We're working on a number of different things. We were actually just talking yesterday about making sure that we prioritize the grace period program that we're working on to make sure that when people need to do downtime for upgrades or moving or replacing hardware, that they have an appropriate time to do so. So stay tuned for more information about that. We have written a few blog posts about containment mode and a few other things in that vein, but we'll be talking more about that as we get closer to the beta and then production.
Great, thanks, JT. The next question is one that it was kind of similar to the questions 4 and 5 earlier in the presentation. Someone's asking about the last town hall. We learned more about the token release scheme and was sort of curious about how that goes. But since we already covered that, in the interest of time, I'd like to move along to the next new question, and that is there any update on how you'll phase out the current satellites on the network? Because it shows signs of centralized services where file pointers are saved on one satellite. If I understand correctly, I can't change the satellite without moving my files from the previous satellite, right?
Right. So it sounds like you've had a fairly close reading of the white paper. The white paper, I mean, ultimately in the tardigrade network, we're going to be running satellites by Storj Labs. And then we will be encouraging a broad range of other organizations to run their own satellites. It's possible to use the open source storage code to run your own satellites. But in terms of being able to share accounts across different satellite instances, we believe that right now one of the best ways to get true decentralization is through partitioning. But of course, there are still ongoing discussions about how to make that system better and address more users. I guess the only other thing I'd say is just to read more about our thinking about this. Definitely check out white paper sections 210, 49, 62, and Appendix A.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm having a slight glitch here. I just need to hit refresh on the questions list. How can we save, or how will the V3 network be more effective for storage operators in Europe? Currently, as far as I see, the European nodes have much higher response time than US node. JT?
So this is another thing that we're actively talking through about how to make satellites that are either global with global load balancers, having satellites in different regions and geographies. And ultimately, one of the things we want to do is provide satellites to different customer bases, different users with different even content policies that provide different rules for how to best have the best performance, geographic location, and latency and redundancy for people in different locales. So ultimately, right now, I would say that what we've built for our alpha is not reflective of our long-term goals in its fullness.
Okay, great. How can we save our SQL database backup on Storj? John Gleason?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love it if you save your SQL database backup on Storj, but just for the short term, be aware that it's still an alpha and we're doing planned deliberate wipes throughout the alpha. So don't store the only backup copy of your SQL database on Storj right now. But one of the great things about storing SQL databases on Storj network is that we're really optimized for those large files, and not only optimized for the large files, but we have a partner program in place with many of the open source database providers. And so if you check out our open source partner program page, you'll see that Mongo, for example, Maria, and several of the others are in our partnership program, and we will be releasing connectors as part of our, what's that release, JT, the connectors release?
ISS.
ISS, that's right, the International Space Station. And that'll be a really exciting release for us because it'll actually provide you a canned way to directly integrate from your database software to store backups on Storj. And when you do that, not only is it just as durable and performant and much more cost effective than your typical cloud software providers, but also a meaningful portion of that revenue actually is given back to those open source projects. And so we're really excited about that program. And as we launch ISS, you can see the catalog of connectors that we'll have available, and we'll be continuously building additional connectors as we go forward.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just kick over a duplicate question that we have brought up before, and just in case somebody didn't hear the real short answer to it previously, I'm going to ask GT, can you tell me when new operators will be able to join the network? This person's been trying to join since the closing of Storj v2.
Reiterate what we said earlier in the town hall is that we're inviting people as quickly as we can. The rate at which we're able to invite people is not a reflection on our belief about them as storage node operators, but just our careful growth of the network. So thank you so much for your patience. Please keep waiting. We know that there's lots of very qualified storage node operators out there that are still waiting, hopefully for an invite, and we're going to meet that with invites as soon as we can.
Okay, thanks, JT. I think that definitely bears repeating because we really do value everybody who's on the wait list. Next question, is there a specific reason why Storj works on the Ethereum blockchain? Why didn't Storj Labs create its own blockchain? Sean?
Great question. So this takes us quite a couple of years. Originally we were on the counterparty network. So that was an abstraction protocol on Bitcoin that allowed us to create the Storj token. At that time, it was called SJCX. And that worked for quite a little while. But when Bitcoin started running into scaling issues, then it ended up having a very, very poor user experience for our users. So we were doing payments to our users that normally take 10, 20 minutes. But kind of during this scaling kind of portion in Bitcoin's history, these payments would take days or weeks to process. And so that just wasn't really a good user experience, and we were paying a lot of money in fees. So it made sense to look at alternate solutions. And when we kind of did the rundown and evaluation, Ethereum came up as kind of the easiest choice to migrate to, the one that people had the most adoption for, the one that we could have integration with many others in the ecosystem, And just kind of going down the list, it seemed like the best choice for the platform to switch to. So we did do that switch in 2017, early 2017, and we're glad we did that switch. As for your question around building our own blockchain, we're a storage company, and so we're not a blockchain building company. I've been in the industry for a while, and it really takes a lot of time and effort to build your own blockchain, and so that's just not our focus, and we prefer to use existing rails that have been widely accepted. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'd like to move along to the next question, and that is, how do you see your partner strategy evolve over the next 18 to 24 months? John Gleason?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of initial success with our open source partner program, and that's been really a great initiative for us because it's identified partners who are really well aligned with our interests and our commitment to open source, at the same time who have the right kind of data that's very healthy for a distributed and decentralized network like ours. Over the next 18 to 24 months, I think that what you'll see is us onboarding a significant number of additional systems integrator partners to build applications on Storj, as well as technology partners who have sort of an affinity towards the type of storage we provide. It's, of course, we encourage everyone who would like to find out more about our partner program to go ahead to the partner page and fill out the form and let us know a little bit about the data, your company, and your interest. And of course, we'll reach out to you and provide some more information.
Okay, great. Going off that, will there be different options and rates for locations, countries data is stored in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the capabilities of the platform evolve, certainly, the different packaging and pricing options that we have will change and evolve over time. Initially, we're really focused on offering a stable, reliable, performant platform. But again, because we don't operate physical locations and data centers, our network is distributed around the world. And it gives us a tremendous amount of capabilities in terms of targeting data for geolocation, compliant storage, all the way through CDN use cases. And absolutely, I think that we can provide value for our customers and also make sure that we are continuing to make it economically viable for operating a storage node.
Great, thanks. How difficult will it be for someone to get approved to run a tardigrade satellite? Will they earn storage tokens for doing so? Next question, how much? JT, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So during the alpha and during the beta, of course, we're really focused on the storage node operator experience and the tardigrade user experience. And so we're not really focused right now very much on the satellite operator experience. There is, kind of our goal for the tardigrade network is to really work closely with tardigrade satellite operators. Obviously, because this is an open source project, as we mentioned before, anyone can run their own satellite. It won't be considered a tardigrade satellite unless we've gone through a bit of due diligence to make sure that the quality and the SLA that we want to provide as part of the tardigrade network is something that we can provide as part of that satellite. So, and basically, tardigrade is like our WordPress.com for the WordPress.org version of the open source sort of that's sort of an analogy of what we're trying to build with tardigrade. Really, I think for the short term to medium term future, we're going to be working with people to try and set up tardigrade satellites. And so if you're interested in getting approved for a tardigrade satellite, that's definitely something you should reach out to us and start talking with us about. But I don't think that we have very blanket statements we can make about that at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, JT. I have two questions for Ben, and I'll give them to you one at a time. The first is, how many employees are enrolled in Storj paychecks or receive a percentage of their pay in Storj? And this is referring to the information that Catherine Johnson was giving out earlier.
Great. Well, let me preface this by saying that one of our philosophies at Storj is that we want our employees to be aligned in terms of incentive and experience with people in our broader community. So whether you call it eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne, everybody within Storj operates a storage node. So that's 42 out of the hundreds that are and soon thousands that are going to be out there. We also have a bonus program, which all employees are enrolled in, which pays out a small number of tokens when we hit certain milestones, such as availability of the service, durability of the service, number of customers, et cetera. And finally, we just launched a program that will allow employees to take a percentage, and that's a limited percentage of their salary in Storj token rather than in dollars. What I would say is that there is broad participation, but most people take a fairly small percentage of their salary in the program.
Great, thanks. Okay, so here's the second question. How many SNOs, and by SNO I mean storage node operators, are there currently on the Alpha network?
That's a great question. So again, when we look back at the V2 network, as we've talked about before, we had close to 100,000 storage node operators with well over 100 petabytes of capacity. Right now, we're much smaller as we're growing out the V3 network. I think at the end of this alpha, we had close to 1,000 storage node operators and sort of low single-digit petabytes of capacity. I'm expecting that will grow by an order of magnitude as we go between alpha and beta, and then market forces will take over.
Okay, great.
And hopefully it becomes ultimately much larger than the V2 network, but driven in a sustainable way and driven by customer demand.
Thanks. I have a question for JT. And the question from our viewer is, should I always set up satellite nodes in my region for better performance when coming to upload and download files from it? Can storage nodes and satellites run on the same machine? What's the best practice? Are dynamic IPs okay for this, or should it be a dedicated IP?
That's a great question. Ultimately, the easiest thing to do, we hope, will be to use an existing satellite that someone has already set up. Satellites are untrusted in the sense that you're not actually giving a satellite any of your unencrypted information. But a satellite is responsible for doing a significant number of things to protect your data while on the network. So probably the easiest step is always to use an existing satellite. In terms of the performance of the satellite in its region and geography, the satellite only introduces a little bit of latency about your metadata. And so it shouldn't actually affect your throughput and overall upload-download speeds. That's going to be determined based solely on the speed to the storage nodes that you're uploading to directly. So ultimately, you can run a storage node and a satellite on the same machine, but satellites are going to, once we get to the point of having better documentation about what it takes to run a satellite, they will have much more stringent requirements, will probably require a DNS entry. Storage node operators do not need a static IP, can use a dynamic IP, and so it's much simpler to run a storage node with much less requirements.
Okay, thanks. Question, does Storj expect to have enough tokens available for payouts in the next 2 years? And if not, will Storj then purchase tokens on the market in order to do so? Ben?
Sure. Actually, before I answer that, I do want to make one other comment about one of my previous answers, which is that the token report does break out by category everything that we are spending tokens on, including payments to storage node operators, as well as there's a line that refers to any payments that come out to employees. So you can track the total volume that's being paid out. To answer this question, again, remember that the way we've run our network, customers can pay us in dollars or in storage tokens. Payouts are made to to storage node operators in tokens. And we're still very early in the network growth, so the volumes haven't required us to purchase from the open market. As we ramp through beta and beyond, we'll get a much better sense of what sort of the ratio is of people who are paying in tokens versus the number of tokens that are getting paid out. And if it turns out that most of the customers pay us in dollars, and of course all of our payouts are made in tokens, then we really have 3 mechanisms that we can use. We can offer a discount for people who pay in tokens. We can purchase tokens on the open market, or we can release from our reserves. And our goal, of course, is to ultimately get the market to a self-sustaining and healthy level.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next question, I think, is one that you're going to love, John Gleason. And that question is, are there any collabs with other companies or projects in the crypto space?
Yeah, this is a great question. So one of the interesting things is that there are a lot of wonderful DApps out there, and we're really starting to see that renaissance of those DApps hitting their stride and really providing real value. We've got a number of collaborations with DApps because, being really the only production quality decentralized storage provider out there, we're just like the natural choice. So we've been working with a number of companies in a variety of different spaces. For example, a identity and access management provider, Sphere Identity, is one of our partners. That's a really forward-thinking and interesting application. In addition to that, Hercules is a company that's doing supply chain management, integrating with our platform, another longtime partner. We're also working with some of the newer decentralized cloud marketplaces like Terminal.co and Nodehaven. And of course, ArtTrade, who's another very forward-thinking decentralized company out there, did a phenomenal integration between IPFS gateway and storage backend. Their work was really, really interesting to us. And they're definitely someone we're watching from a partnership perspective, and you should check out their work. But yes, if you are a DApp out there, please bring us your data.
How can they contact you?
The best way to do it is to find the partnership page, because when you fill out the partnership form, it also tells us a little bit about what data you have and the particular usage, and it helps us prioritize and figure out how best to respond.
Okay, thanks, John. I have a question for JT. JT, will there be a guide or suggestions for storage node and satellite operators on how to perform SecOps or local storage redundancy on their systems?
Yes, but not maybe immediately. We'll be focusing on storage nodes first and then moving on to satellites.
Okay, great. I see another question about pricing here. So stepping back to the possibility of regional pricing, will the data stay localized in that region? So if crossing borders, will that fall under the regional pricing, or would that be multiple charging?
So a lot of the pricing questions right now for sort of the regionalized data and some of the more advanced use cases in terms of geo-targeting or choosing different types of storage nodes are a little bit ahead of where we are right now. We're really focused on providing a good, high-quality service at an economical price. One thing I can commit to is that our pricing will be much less complicated and overwhelming than that of the cloud providers right now, where you are logging in and your experience for selecting regional storage can only be described as bad. So I think we can really simplify this, and we can make this a tool developers will love. And also not only from a usability perspective, but from a pricing perspective as well.
Okay, thanks. I have a question about data. What happens to your data in case of a satellite failure, JT?
Yeah, so if a satellite fails, one of the things that we want to make sure happens is that with the creation of the satellites that we're hosting, the satellites have rigid backups. We run satellites just like we would run any other Fortune 500 cloud service. Satellites obviously are going to have a very critical component to our overall availability and durability. And so we're going to run satellites like you would expect any tech company would run any of their services. At the same time, we also ultimately are planning on doing import and export of satellites in the near term. In the long term, we actually have a number of plans that we're discussing to try and improve that user experience even more. And that's actually, I think, section 6.2 that I referenced in the white paper about some of the ways that we're considering improving the overall user experience around backups and metadata storage in the satellite. So definitely check out section 6.2.
Okay, great, thanks. So this brings us to the end of our live questions. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who contributed. And it was really great to hear all of your questions and your feedback. We do always try to end on a high note. Sean, do you have a joke for the listeners?
Oh man, no. Maybe next. I'll give you one next town hall.
Okay.
Next town hall.
I'm holding you to that. Okay, so again, thank you to everybody. We would love for everyone listening to get involved in a variety of fashions. So one thing that you can do is contribute to our GitHub. We have a really great mix of help wanted and good first issues. Bounties are available in many cases. So go check out our GitHub, github.com/storage. We're also actively seeking a diverse mix of cool people to become community leads, event organizers, volunteers. If you're looking to start a meetup, you can just reach out to me directly. Please join our community. And if you would like to contact me, my email is just jocelyn@storj.io. And finally, please follow us on social. We are constantly communicating as much news as we can, as quickly as we can about all our developments. So you can find us on Twitter under Storj Project and also under tardigrade_IO. Thank you again for